I live south of Hankinson. That's been pointed out many times. I can do everything from my home in Hankinson that anyone can do from Fargo. I've done radio from there. My wife has conducted her business as a woman that headed up a number of states, president of health and home health and hospice, and nothing has stopped us from being able to work at home. And now you see what's happened with education, rural education because of COVID. Kids were at home in many cases, and it didn't stop them from getting the education they needed. A huge part of that is broadband. A huge part of that is broadband. That's the reason that we can do it. When you think of broadband in North Dakota, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to think of David Crothers. David Crothers was a champion of making sure North Dakota, and understanding the rural area, somebody from Carson and Elgin and those areas that used to still go down there and hunt a little bit and yet knew North Dakota inside and out, making sure we didn't get left behind. Making sure things like Beck, which you're watching too right now, succeeded the way it succeeded and has become one of the premier places for information that you can get, whether that be sports or news. David Crothers. We lost David Crothers. We did. And over the weekend, Shirley Bloomfield, who heads up the national organization for broadband, wrote a piece on her friend David. And it got to me. The minute I read it, it got to me. And I said, I got to find her. I've got to talk to her. And I've got to let her describe David Crothers to you in her words. And she's willing to give us time to do just that. Shirley, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Joel, it is, sorry it is under such sad circumstances, but I am delighted to share thoughts and insights and memories of David Crothers any day of the week.
Yeah. We lost David to cancer. When it came back this time, being David's friend and speaking to him a number of times during the course of a week, I kept saying this one's bad. It was bad because he didn't have much left to fight with. That brilliant mind and that body was getting weak, not the mind. And it was hard. It was so hard to watch. And so, in the comments that you wrote, it just, I have this image of the beginning, the first time you met. Walk people through that.
So David and I met, Joel, it has to be decades ago. It was right after David had returned from his stint in Washington, D.C., working for Senator Andrews, back to North Dakota to run what was then the Telephone Cooperative Association for the state, where he found different ways to serve, and he was very engaged in funding, which came out of the United States Department of Agriculture. And he was on a thing called the Rural Telephone Bank Board. So I was a new lobbyist for NTCA. I was 8 months pregnant. I'm ready for my first Rural Telephone Bank Board meeting, and I'm standing in the hallway of USDA, which is a pretty grim building. And I finally just couldn't stand anymore. So I just slid my back down to sit my bottom on the floor. And David Crothers, who I had not met yet, came up to me, slid right down along the wall with me and sat down and introduced himself and said, "All right, Missy, let's get to work." And, that was my introduction to David. And when I say that, right, you can hear his voice in your head. Like David is his voice in my head because he had that ability to connect with everybody and anybody, any place and any time. And when he engaged with you, he really cared what you had to say. And I felt it right away. And that was the start of a very long friendship.
He could read a room. In this case, he could read a hallway. He could tell exactly what was going on. Here you were, 8 months pregnant, still going to work, still doing the job, standing in a hallway, and all you needed was a friendly voice to talk to. I mean, that's David. That's exactly who he was.
Absolutely. And, David, I don't think there was a dog I had gotten or a child I subsequently gave birth to that didn't have something come from David, whether it was a dog collar with their name on it, whether it was a T-shirt with the child's name on it. David was always so thoughtful. So he was able to meld, his interest in you personally with what he needed to do to get the job done for North Dakota. And it was just a magical touch because you know what the difference is, Joel? He actually cared. Yeah. He didn't, like so many people will go through the motions and they'll do the right thing. But David sincerely cared what you had to say. sincerely cared why my feet were killing me in the middle of that hallway, and did his best to make me feel comfortable in an awkward situation.
He had tickets. He had season tickets to the University of North Dakota hockey team, and of course, he was UND through and through. Anybody that hung around with David knew that. And he gave me 2 tickets to come meet him one time. So I go up there, and I took along, I think, granddaughter number 2. I've got 5 of them, so you get confused over which one you took where. He spent so much time talking to her that it had to take away from what he went there to do, which was watch a hockey game. You know, he wanted her to understand the game. He wanted her to understand the arena. He was like this hockey mentor. And I looked at him, I said, Dave, you don't got to do that. No. I want her, number one, he wanted her to go to UND. Number 2, he wanted her to love University of North Dakota hockey. And that was David to me. That was the beauty of David to me.
And you know, it's so funny you would say that, Joel, because here I am in Washington, D.C., and we've got about 500 of our rural broadband folks from across the country who have flown in to hit the Hill today. So it's particularly poignant to be missing David. But I've had at least 3 people come up to me so far and say, you know, David used to always offer me the UND hockey tickets to come up for a game with him. And that was his way of connecting and proselytizing North Dakota to everybody across the country.
I can tell you this, Shirley, that look he'd get on his face when he took you down by Carson, he took you down by Elgin, I should say. Now you get in trouble if you get the wrong small town. And you would miss that first pheasant. That look that he would give you, it was painful, absolutely painful. So, you know, what you wrote, you didn't have to. And it mattered so much to us here in the upper Midwest who love David and want to remember him exactly as you described him. So thank you for sharing your time today.
Absolutely. It's a treat to be here. And let's all remember David and why broadband is so robust in the state of North Dakota, thanks to his hard work.
It is. It really, really is. He could cross any political aisle. He didn't care if you were a D or an R. When I was in the state legislature, he always, when we went from a significant minority down to a small minority, back up to a pretty good sized minority, he always didn't matter. He always mattered. He always took the time to talk to you. I love that about him.
I completely agree. And you know what? The only thing he couldn't convert me to is I'm still Diet Pepsi as opposed to Diet Coke, but I'm not sure I can picture David without a Diet Coke in his hands. And he was always willing to share his spares and his extra. But talk about a person who made friends everywhere he went, and his ability to tell the stories of people who lived in North Dakota and what they faced every day and what the particular challenges were. And he also loved to send me pictures of your snowstorms. As a matter of fact, I will share, Joel, the last week that David was still with us, he was sending me pictures that somebody had sent to him from Dickinson, North Dakota, and just sharing North Dakota weather with you, Shirley. Yeah. So we were comparing to the end.
Shirley, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.